Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And I'm Chris.
This is Adam.
And we're going to give our hot takes on the game that we just finished playing, Vindication. As always, I'm going to give a brief description of the game and then we'll jump in with our thoughts. In Vindication, you find yourself washed up on an unknown island after having been thrown overboard by your crew because of your past deeds. Now you have the chance to start fresh and regain your honor in a place where nobody knows you and where your past actions can be forgotten. Using a combination of engine building, area control, and action selection, you will compete with your opponents to become the most honorable scumbag on the island. On your turn, you'll take 3 actions. Activate a companion, which are unique cards added to your tableau. Travel, moving your player pawn to a new spot on the board, which will allow you to access some specific map locations. And activating a map location, using the unique action for one of the locations adjacent to you. Many of the action costs are paid for using one of 6 different attributes that can be generated by moving cubes from an influence pool on your player board to one of the 6 attributes pools on the main board, or by combining some attributes to become other more rare attributes. Most of the actions you're taking will be with the ultimate goal of gaining honor, which can be achieved in many ways. The game ends when one of the random endgame triggers that has been revealed through the course of the game is met, and the player with the most honor is the winner. Vindication was designed by Mark Neidlinger and published by Orange Nebula. So let's jump into our discussion. Adam, why don't you start? Give us your take on the mechanisms of the game.
The mechanisms of Vindication. So one thing that's kind of interesting to me about Vindication is first of all, you start the game out and you're kind of exploring the map. The map is blank. So all these kind of pseudo worker placement, I guess worker adjacent places you can go to, they're not revealed yet. It's the same set of 16 or so tiles or something like that are going to be revealed throughout the course of every game, but you're not sure about where they're going to be situated. So that's kind of interesting. A little bit of variable start, but it's not right at the start. You're kind of exploring as opposed to dealing out, so that's kind of different for me. That's kind of a new mechanism that I can't think of many other games that like that has kind of exploration and set up the map as you go. I guess like your 4Xs have that and stuff too, but go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I do like this because one of the general mechanisms is that essentially it's a variable action selection game, right? And so every turn you're doing 3 things, and there's a lot of things you can do in the game, but your 3 things are very specific actions. And one of the things that the game does is it sets some restrictions on which actions you can take in any turn. So one of the actions being select a place on the map board. And basically what that does, it sets you up to limit which of those actions you can take. So you don't have too many decisions to try to make. Anyway, getting back to your point about the variable map board, what's interesting about that is that I noticed, we've played a couple games of this now, and the way that the map ends up getting laid out really changes the flow of the game. The first time we played it, it felt like the map was pretty spread out. The buildings that are duplicates were kind of all over the board. You could do almost anything you needed to with the movement that you could generate in a turn. And this one was a lot different. This one, it was like we ended up having most of the duplicate tiles ended up pretty close together, close to each other. If you wanted to do, one specific thing like, visit an inn, you had to go on one side of the board. But if you wanted to, visit the monastery, you had to go all the way to the other side of the board. And you really couldn't do both of those things within, one turn of each other because of the way the board came out. So that was just one thing, one specific thing about the board being variable laid out that it really changed how we could even interact with the game from that perspective.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting that you mentioned that, because that was one of the things that I remember from the first time we played this game, was that one of the main sort of engine building aspects is this one tile called the inn, where you get to get additional companion cards, and everybody needs to do that. And so I think maybe you and one other person, I forget who, controlled the 2 inns. So you really had to keep kind of throwing points at you guys to use those inns, whereas this time you had 2 of them right next to each other. So it was, and then there was another one across the board, but because there was the 2 right next to each other, you had more options. So even if you didn't want to, even if you had to throw a point at somebody, you kind of got to pick who you were throwing those points at, and you could do that strategically.
Yeah, and that that part of it, which is kind of interesting, the area control of this game, is that anytime after you use or wherever you end your once per turn, you can give up some of your attribute tokens off your board. I forget what the pool is called, but it's basically what's that called? What's the
you got the influence is in the middle, and the left is your potential, and then the right side is your
conviction.
Thank you.
So from the conviction pool, which is kind of hard to get cubes up there, right? There's only a couple ways to move them up, but at the end of your, or sometime during your turn, you can use one of those conviction cubes and you can put it out on a space on the board that you're going to use. And so that's pretty simple. It's not that complicated to use, and it ends up being worth endgame points. But there's a couple neat things about that. One is that when somebody else wants to use that same space, they have to pay, you basically get 2 victory points or honor points in this game for it. And so that's a clever decision. Oftentimes I found myself not wanting to use a space that I had planned to use or that I would really like to use just because I didn't want to give you guys extra victory points, even if it might have benefited me more. And so there was a lot of combating, because then you can also spend 2 conviction to take that space away from somebody. And if you have the conviction available before you take the action, you can actually do it before you have to take the action. So there ends up being a lot of combating for that little thing, and a lot of energy and time spent into kind of moving things to conviction just so that you can control those spaces on the board and try to prevent from giving people extra 2 points. I wonder if we played this game a lot more, if you would, maybe there isn't that much negative of giving somebody a couple points, do you really want to spend 2 conviction to take that away just so that they don't get 2 points, especially if you're only going to use that tile once, but at least for right now, it always felt like, I don't want them to get the 2 points. So I'm going to go through the extra effort of building up the conviction and take that away from them. So kind of an interesting way to do area control. Yeah,
it is. That's one thing I kind of overlooked. It didn't feel much like an area control game to me. I guess there is that aspect of is a very light area control, I guess, because you can control, you get 2 points per area controlled at the end of the game.
At the end of the game.
And then if you want to take over somebody else's, you got to spend 4 points worth of conviction, potential points.
How is it calculated into potential points?
I guess conviction is worth, if you use those in order to control an empty space, that would be 2 points right there.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, because you could just leave them out in other places on the board. Yeah, absolutely right. Yep.
You could just leave them on an empty space for 2 points. So you're spending 4 points to get, potentially 4 points to get 2 points. So it's a nice trade-off. It's something you have to think about. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, interesting. And you're right. I mean, it's not really an area control game, obviously, but that's just one more place where you can get points and kind of get an interact. I guess it's one of the few ways that you're actually interacting with people in this game.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting set of decisions that come out of it. Adam, you mentioned you don't really think about an area control game. Maybe that's why you stepped all over us tonight, and I wasted all my time trying to control the board.
Well, no, it's funny. I didn't really think about it much as an area control until you said something. I was like, I guess that was area control a little bit, very, very light. And you touched on it. The interaction, that's one of my favorite parts to talk about with games. So aside from a little bit of light blocking and then that light area control, what other, I don't know, Chris, you see any other, help me out with any other kind of interaction?
No, it's pretty lightweight. I mean, there's the little bit of blocking, and then there's the little bit of, deciding whether or not you want to do something good for you if it gives points to somebody else, which is, I mean, it's not insignificant. I mean, Steve was playing, who was our fourth in the game, had a space that I needed to use, and he was way in the back. So I was like using that space with abandon. I was like throwing points at him. Then of course at the end he skyrocketed ahead. Now, I don't know that those points are the ones that got him the second place, but certainly made a difference.
Well, he was throwing points at me, and I ended up way in last. So I don't know if that mattered either. But there's one other area of interaction, and that's basically whoever controls the mastery at the end of the game. And that can be pretty significant points. So, basically the mastery means like you're building up a tableau of cards, whether it's by defeating monsters, which are, orange cards, or whether it's by hiring different characters, that are different colors, red, blue, or yellow, etc. But basically whoever has the most cards of a given color at the end of the game has mastery. And so I think it's either worth 5 points or 7 points, depending on which color it is. And so that can be some decent points. So that's one other place for interaction. I was watching for it. I just wasn't in contention at all, but I could see that Adam was going to kill us by taking 2 mastery tiles. And, I really didn't have any opportunity to catch up to any of you guys at the end there. So there was an opportunity to compete. Not like Adam kind of had that run away with, but Chris and Steve were pretty close on a couple colors, and they could have competed. So it's one more spot, to watch for interaction. It's not major. But.
And not to tip my hand, that's something I just kind of stumbled on. I wasn't even thinking about that. And all of a sudden I just worked for my engine that I was building. So I had, 3 purples and 2 greens. So yeah, a little bit of set collection helped out with some in-game points there.
Chris, any specific mechanisms that you want to chat about first?
Yeah, I was going to mention 2 of them, one that I did like and one that I didn't. For the one that I did like, I really enjoy the companion cards that are a big part of this game, and that's kind of like your little crew. If you're adventurers, this is your crew. And each turn, you get an opportunity to use one of your companion cards or your main card. You're going to activate a character. And each one has a unique ability, and some of them are pretty interesting. And you can really create some pretty decent combos. Like, I think there's one thing that kind of saved me in this game that got me, third instead of last, was the fact that I had a couple cards that I was able to combo with nicely, where by the time I was done, I actually get to play 3 characters just by, starting this first character, and then it comboed to another, then it comboed to another. And I like that. That's a neat mechanism. The one I didn't care for so much is the 6 different resources that you're using in the game. And I guess, nothing novel about the idea in a game like this of having the resources. But these struck me as so abstract, and too many of them, where it felt kind of fussy. Especially that there's 3 standard, and then there's 3 that you have to add other resources to get to those resources. And, that one I did not find as engaging. I felt like it felt so fractured because there's so many things you have to do that take so many resources, and there's so few of them available, that it just, like I said, it felt kind of fussy and unsatisfying to me.
Yeah, I think that, so the combos, you mentioned the combos with your characters, and that was awesome. It was actually really fun for me to watch the combos that you were pulling off every turn, Chris, and it was fun for me to watch the combos that Adam was pulling off with like the character that let him put extra influence on his relics, and then he could pull the relics off for points. And like, you guys both had some really interesting stuff going on. So that's one of the neat aspects of this game, is that because every card is unique in each of the 6 different decks, and that's if you're just playing with the base game and none of the extra modules, that's a lot of variety. And that's really where all the variety comes in the game. For the most part, is just those cards that come up. But the problem with it is, like you said, it's very abstracted. And so they've got a really neat, it's a really neat, elegant idea that basically you just have these cubes of your color, and they're sitting there available to use, and you can do anything with them. You can put them out on a building to control the area. You can put them on a character to get its benefit. You can put them, you can put them out on the, basically, like, you can give them up for different things. Like, Jason, those cubes do everything. But the problem I think, and why it feels so abstracted, is because that's all they are. They're just little cubes. You're just moving around to different spaces on the board. And so it's kind of neat that you've got this tool that you can really do anything with and kind of use it how you want to. It's very sandboxy. It's like, hey, I want to go and fight monsters all day today. I can do that. But this other person wants to go and, become vindicated and just build up their mastery of blue. Like, you can really go different directions just with this one square cube, this cube of your color. But it's kind of boring that it's just cubes of your color that you're just moving around the board.
Amen to that.
Yeah. I'll jump in and I'll say one aspect of board games that I like in general is, I don't know it's necessarily a named mechanic, but combo building. I think that's part of the discovery and joy. So, you're digging through this constructed group of cards, and you see, oh, this will work good with this one and this one here. So that kind of discovery and finding a little combo that works together, and that's neat. So you can, in the different ways those work, or over a series of games, finding those new organizations of cards you haven't seen before. So that was, this is only my second time playing, but to find a little something like that worked out was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the most interesting things about the game, I think. Yeah, one other thing that you mentioned, Chris, about it just being a little fiddly and abstract is, aside from the influence being able to be used to kind of activate any card and building out on the board, but it's also the fact that the influence is used in those 3 pools on your player mat. And that's, it almost like it adds an extra little thing that you have to mess with that isn't that fun to deal with to me, right? It reminds me of, like, maybe the one aspect of Gaia Project, it can be a fun little puzzle, but that doesn't really get me psyched up. And that's the power pools in Gaia Project, where you're having to move the power around in certain situations. And then if you get enough in the right place, then you can get benefits out of it. So maybe if they didn't have that, then this just would be too simple, like there just wouldn't be that much of a puzzle if you're just moving cubes around. So maybe it adds that little bit extra, but I just don't find that piece of it that enjoyable to, kind of like just waste actions just to try to figure out how to get cubes from one pool on my board to another pool on the board. It's just not that fun to do.
That's a good comparison. I actually, I was thinking of that same comparison, and I thought Gaia Project did it better.
Yeah.
I agree. That was one thing as you're saying that, Tim. I'm like, yeah, Tim nailed it because you have, for me, you have this. It starts on the left with potential, and you can slide your potential over to influence, and you can slide your influence over to conviction. And for me, I just had this, I don't know how many, 8, 9 cubes sitting there in potential that were just teasing me. I couldn't use. They're just sitting there and I'm throwing cubes back into the potential. So I'm just like, I'm working with like really 4 or 5 cubes the whole game. And there's this whole pile of cubes. I see everybody else is just having a cube party, whereas I'm just working with like, again, the minimum amount of cubes. So it's just kind of, it's frustrating to see all those cubes out there that you can't do anything with.
Yeah. Interestingly though, Adam, I think you actually, because of that, you ended up actually being really efficient with it. Because if you looked at my board at the end of the game, I had a reason. One of my cards kind of motivated me to want to be vindicated and flip my main character over. So I really worked to get all my cubes out of the potential and into the influence sphere, right? So I'm sitting there with like 15 cubes in my influence sphere. And then another thing wanted me to push all the influence into whatever that top pool is. Again, I keep forgetting the name of it, but conviction. And so at the end of the game, I was sitting there with like, I don't know how many cubes there are, 18 cubes sitting on my player map between those two things, but that meant that they weren't used. They weren't sitting out on characters like I'd activated them. So you didn't have a bunch to work with, but you kind of used them as much as you needed to, even if it wasn't fun. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like you felt like you were struggling with it, but I almost think you probably did it well by not wasting your time just pulling all this stuff and not using it, which is what I ended up.
Well, he did win, so
not necessarily good or bad, but just that's kind of how the game played out this time.
One thing I did like, and it is fiddly and this, but you got your colors that you're changing. So I think it's primaries, right? So your blue and your yellow that you're changing into a green. So you do take those 2 cubes, you turn it into a more powerful cube, and boom, that 1 cube pops back over to your influence. That was kind of nice. You take, and you can do that as a free action anytime during the game. So if you do have a whole bunch of cubes out there, you can just trade them into these, hypothetically more powerful colors. And then that frees up a bunch more cubes to use. And you can do that, I guess the timing of when you do that and being able to kind of do that at any time during your turn, that was nice. And I think I used that pretty well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I'll go back and reiterate because you guys both touched on it. But what I think actually makes this game is the variety of cards and the combos you can get out of them. Like that's what the game is all about. That's what's fun to me. So I wanted to bring that up again because I've kind of been talking about a few things that I wasn't super hot on, but I actually, still really liked the game. I still had a fun time playing it. And I think it's all driven by the cards that are available and what you can figure out to do with them. So I just, I don't want to let that go. Like that is still done in a really interesting way, even if some of the other elements to it are a little clunky, in my opinion. All right. Any other comments on mechanisms?
Nope.
None for me.
All right. So let's jump over to the production. And I want to start with production because, and I'll bring up one to start with, but I have several comments on production here. Vindication was a game that I saw back when it first came up on Kickstarter and really had me intrigued. Like I liked the concept. I liked the story behind this Euro game. Like the idea that you're a scumbag and, you got thrown off your boat and you're on this island, you got to discover and do all this stuff. Right. But for some reason, I don't know if it was Orange Nebula that made this decision or if the designer originally did, but for some reason they've done so many things with the production here that seem to be done just for the purpose of being unique, but that aren't really that functional. And the thing that stood out to me when I first checked out the Kickstarter, several years ago, and it ended up turning me off on it is the board layout and the way that you move around the board, right? Okay. So if you haven't seen this board, it's basically a hexagon board. And in the middle, on the outside of the board is where you place the cards. And there's, it's basically 6-sided because it supports each of the 6 different attribute pools and the card pools. And I'll get back to the attribute pools being on the main board. But if you look at inside of that, then there's a more mini hex and it almost looks like a Chinese checkers board, right? It's like a little grid with triangles and then in between each triangle is a little hex space. And what it ends up looking like is just an abstracted Chinese checkerboard or a chessboard or something like that. And it doesn't actually feel like a map in any way, especially once you get the building tiles out there. So that is like that. It's like that and like a dozen other things that I'll come back to after you guys have a chance to talk about production decisions that make the board. I mean, it's different. It's different than what you've seen in other places, but it's not really good. It's not. I think it could have been so much cooler if it was a board where you actually maybe I don't know if the locations were like laid out in a little different way, even if it was a little harder to track what locations you could touch, but if it felt like a real map instead of just a chessboard, that's the number one thing that really turned me off on the game when I first saw it.
Yeah, I love that you said that. It's like Chinese checkers with Dungeons and Dragons characters on it. It's basically it.
Yeah, I agree. The board it's a hex grid with some triangles in there, and I don't know why that is a turnoff. It's
all right. Chris, anything from you that you want to call out on the production?
Yeah, well, I want to second what you said because I agree with that, and I think this is also the place where I get to talk about theme because that's all I ever want to talk about is the theme. And like you said, it's very abstract, and I think you were being my game therapist one time, and you were like, "Oh, I don't think you like abstraction." And ever since you said that, I'm like, I think you're right. I think I don't like abstraction. It's like for anybody who's seen that, the Disney movie, the Pixar movie. Inside Out, where they like go into the world of abstraction and the characters all turn into these like weird shapes. And I'm like, yeah, that just doesn't, it's not that appealing. I like the story. And you kind of hit it on the head with, it sounds really interesting. Yeah, you're on this island and you're a scumbag and you got dumped there by your crew. And then I'm going to move a bunch of cubes around. I mean, it sounds interesting to start with, but then there's no story to it. And production can make such a difference there because just something as simple as, like, I'll take Scythe, for example, where it has the cool little tokens for different types of resources, which is not just Scythe, but a million different games. But, having those things actually look like what they are and to have the map look like a map. So it's not just a big grid. And all of those things can, either serve to bring you into a story or take you out of a story. And while there's a lot of cool mechanisms here, I just feel like the production really takes you out of the story, and I just found that a little bit unappealing.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Well said, Chris. Yeah, well said, Chris. I totally agree that the art and production for me of a board game is part of the kind of the total stimulus package, and so you're getting the mechanics of the game, the puzzle of the game is something that stimulates you. The interaction with the other players is something that stimulates you. The art of the game is something that's, visually stimulates the brain as well as, amongst other things. So it's just kind of a blend, and the mixing of the production and theme, like you said, Chris, is just, you're just moving around cubes, hopping around location, trading this for that. And it's 100% mediocre.
Yeah. At risk of being too down on it, though, I do want to say I actually thought the art on the cards was nice. I think one of you guys mentioned that. I did like that.
Yeah,
it is good.
I was just going to mention that too. I mean, that's where all like the art is beautiful and every card is unique, and the characters, if you focus on them, do tell a story. Like if you I saw that happen a couple of times tonight, where it was kind of fun, where a character would do something, and I'd be like, oh, hey, that character just did that. Like that guy really likes to do that thing. So you can kind of get a story out of it. So that's there. But the production otherwise doesn't really support it. Here's the deal, right? Like I like Euro games, and I'm glad that this is a Euro game about adventuring on a fantasy island versus a Euro game like, farming on the coast of the Mediterranean, right? So I still like that it took some Euro game mechanisms and put a fun wrapper on it, even if the wrapper doesn't carry through to the theme. So I won't be too down on that piece of it. But I do just agree that some of the production decisions don't necessarily support that story and that theme as much as I think they could. Okay, I have a couple more things. So again, and I just want to go back to some of what I think are strange decisions that make the game unique, but they don't really help the game. One of the things I really don't like is when you have stuff going on the main board that doesn't need to be doing that. And in this case, it's the fact that your attribute tokens are all controlled in the 6 spots around the main board. I think it would have been a lot less fiddly, a lot easier to track what you've got available to use if they were on a player board in front of you, right? There's no reason why I should be reaching across the board, getting in front of what you're trying to look at on your turn and moving my tokens around I just don't understand why that's there. I mean, it gives it a little symmetry, because then the colored cards are near, it kind of ties, everything with one attribute or, trait together. All the purple stuff is on one part of the board, et cetera. But I think if you just had 6 little, circles on your board that represented the pools and you were just moving your own tokens around, it just would have been a lot smoother. It would have been a lot less fiddly. So that's one more thing that's always bothered me just a little bit about just interacting. It's not just about the look of the game, but it's interacting with the game. That's more challenging than it needs to be. And then the last thing that really bugs me is the player pawn that's moving around the board.
Yeah, well said.
Agreed.
You cannot, if you saw the physical production of this game, everything about the production is high quality materials. But having a little metal token, because even in our case, they're colored, right? Like we were using tabletop simulator tonight, right? So it's like a little colored flag looking token, but it doesn't represent a character. It doesn't represent anything at all. But in the physical production, they're each little metal tokens. So metal's cool to use, but it's a metal token that doesn't represent like anything. It's got like a symbol for your character or something like that. So, the expansion that came out for it, I think it was, I forget, like something in Allies. Anyway, there's an expansion that came out and they actually gave little player standees that match the wretched card, your character card that's in front of you. And even that works a lot better. But they did so much in production here.
Yeah.
Why not throw a mini? It's 4 players. Throw 4 minis in the box, or 5, or however many players it supports. And that would have just been such a much better visual presence on the board, and a much better way to see who's who versus just this little banner thing on the board. So
yeah, really good point.
Yeah. All right, cool. But again, I'll say Orange Nebula, they do a great job with the physical components in a game. And if you looked at it, the physical box of this game has really great game trays. Each player has their individual game trays with everything stacked in there. Everything is really nicely packaged. I just don't understand some of the decisions for the layout and the production and things like that. All right, so let's move on past production. Do you guys have a favorite moment in the game? Anything for you, Chris?
Yeah, there was, it's kind of another ironic moment where, there was that thing I was mentioning before where Steve was in the rear of the game at the kind of a halfway point. And I just said, you know what? I'm gonna have to give points to either Steve or Tim, and Tim always comes from way in the back or way in the front and just rockets to victory. So I'm like, you know what, Steve's way behind, so I'm gonna throw a few points his way, and I'm like, yeah, I don't have to worry about him this time. And so there I am, going to his spot over and over and over again. And then as we kind of closed in at the end, I was like, oh crap. That was not smart. Underestimated him, but it was. I appreciated that he took advantage of that and several other things, and just ran with it, and I came in with a big strong second.
Nice. I like how half the time when we're talking about our favorite moments of the game, we're always talking about somebody else's successes. I don't know. It's still fun to me to see other people do something cool in a game. I don't even care if it's not me winning. It's just fun.
So. It's better when it's me doing it, but
yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. What about? I think it's more. I actually think it's more memorable sometime when someone else is doing it, and you're like, oh crap, how'd they pull that off? We need to make sure they're not cheating. Yeah. If I'm doing it, I'm just like, okay, I planned that out for 15 minutes. I'll execute it and then move on, and I've forgotten that I did it. What about you, Adam? Any particularly favorite moments or standout moments of the game?
Man, I wish I had something. I had some nice combos, but again, that was just kind of ho-hum for me. I just kind of stumbled upon it, and I had these combos in front of me. I was trading this cube to get some points here, and then I had the pumpkin man with the jacked abs. And he was pumpkin man with jacked abs was throwing a pumpkin somewhere, and he was getting me 2 extra points every time. So I just stumbled on some combo and I got a bunch of points and I won. And I didn't have that intense, there wasn't the on the edge of my seat kind of feeling or anything. I just got a lot of points.
Yeah. Well, I think we let you get too far ahead. So there was no tension at all. Everyone knew we were going to win.
But I want to make a comment about something that Adam just said, and it's actually sorry to go back, but it's one of the things that I actually liked in the card art. There's some weird ass stuff happening in there, and that kind of makes it interesting. Like this card, I think it was called Perseverance, and it is. It's this guy with this super jacked, Super Jack's six pack, and he's carrying this gigantic pumpkin, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
It's really persevering.
Oh man,
he's ready to make it to Halloween. He's ready.
That was, I don't know. I just that tickles me to death.
When you hear the word perseverance, you don't think of a jacked six-pack guy like throwing a pumpkin somewhere. That's not what.
No, but I like the imagination that comes up with that.
All right. Well, I didn't have any particular standout moments, but I did. I think like seeing you guys do really well was fun to me tonight. I saw some fun combos going out there. Steve at the end getting 20 points for his monster end game bonuses was pretty awesome. I hadn't been tracking exactly what he's going to get bonuses for, and I was like, oh yeah, everyone will get like 4 to 6 points per monster. He ended up getting like 16 points, I think, with one of his monsters. That was cool to see. But yeah, nothing else that really stood out to me. All right, so let's jump into the big question. Would you request to play this game again? And I'll start with you, Adam.
I would not request to play this game again. It's 100%, like I said earlier, 100% mediocre for me. It's not horrible, but it's not something that gives me that emotion I'm looking for in board game. The stimulus package, my brain's not churning. I'm not like, oh, excited to play this game. I'm not sending gifts to my buddies about with stupid Cthulhu guys on it, like getting pumped up for the game.
After we played the first time, did you feel a little hotter on it after the first play? I thought that you actually requested this one, but
I wanted to because of the production. And actually, by the way, I'm looking at pictures on Board Game Geek now. They do have some pretty cool looking minis that maybe come out in subsequent.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about that in a second. I'll tell you about that. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I've been wanting to try it out since the Kickstarter. I thought it looked cool. I wanted to give it a shot, but after playing it a couple times and then looking at the price tag on it, it's around $90. It's totally like ho hum.
So let me tell you, one of the reasons why it costs $90 is you see those huge minis that are in the box, right? And that comes in the base box. There's 5 huge, I think they're called monuments. The only time they're used, from what I understand, is that they're used. There's one of the little modules where you can apparently get these monuments, and the monuments don't even go on the board or anything. You just set them next to your player mat to identify that you've done something. Like, that's it. So they've put all this effort into these nicely sculpted monuments, and you don't actually do anything with them at all. And that's, again, just a really strange production decision that they made. I know I suspect they probably did it because Kickstarters do really well with big sculpted minis. And so it probably helped sell the game just from people seeing it. But it's such a disappointment when you got something cool like that doesn't actually get any use in the game.
All right. Give me some toys I can play with, some like giant monsters I can slam on Chris's
with sound bases on them.
South Africa and like try to take them out, man.
Yeah. When you said $90, I'm thinking about the TTS, and I'm like, what the hell could be in that box that's worth $90? Is it like free groceries for a month? I mean, I don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, so the company put a lot of money into all that unique art and stuff like that. But when you're thinking about what you're getting value for components, that there's probably a lot of cost in there. They just put it in strange places, in my opinion. What about you, Chris? You weren't very hot on it in our first play. So how did that improve this time? And would you be interested in playing it again?
I'll put it this way. The first time we played it, I didn't love it. And I really, truly sucked at it and couldn't put a game together. And so I was really kind of down on it. So it was actually kind of a joke amongst us that, we're going to get Chris to play Vindication again. The second one, I still feel equally lukewarm about it. I got a little bit more this time, but it's basically I learned to play, do the puzzle a little bit better. But it doesn't. I don't feel passionate about it. I'd play it again if I wouldn't skip game night that night if somebody picked it, but I wouldn't ask for it.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually really excited about it after our first play. It was a game that I'd been watching for a while, and after the first play, I liked kind of how everything came together. I even after the first play, I remember feeling a little like there wasn't a lot of exciting moments, but there were some fun things to do, some fun puzzles to try to figure out and combos to find and things like that. And I think I feel kind of the same way this time, but the fact that I feel the same way and not more excited about it means that I'm not as psyched about it, right? Like, after our first play, I was like, I kind of want to go and buy that. One of the reasons I didn't was because I started to look into some of the really, like the strange production, the cost of the game and what you get out of it for gameplay. And so I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, maybe after another game or two, I'll be more excited about it and then I'll pick it up. I don't think I'm ready to pick it up right now. Like, I think I may request to play it again in the future. I think after the last play, it had me thinking about it after the game a little bit. And sometimes that's exciting to me. If I've got a game that kind of sticks in the back of my mind and makes me think about, I should have done this differently, or I should have done this differently. And I think there were a lot of great opportunities for that. Like, this game was not based on the luck of the draw. I definitely could have gone and made different decisions that could have helped my game. And that means that, hey, that motivates me to want to try it again. So I think I may ask to play it again, but I'm not as excited about it as I was after our first play. And it's not a game that I'm going to be like, really, there's a lot of games that I probably would choose over it that are going to give me some of the same things that I liked, like the combos and the cards and stuff like that. So
this one for me, it went from when it was on Kickstarter, I was very borderline. It was the peak of my unrelenting Kickstarterness, where I would kickstart anything. And I elected not to. And then after the first play, I was like, huh. And after this play, it's just I'm very glad I didn't kickstart it.
Well, you knew something was wrong, because if you didn't back it and you backed like 17 other Kickstarters, then something must have been telling you not to pick it up.
Yeah.
All right. What's going on here?
Your subconscious was tipping you off.
When it rarely does, right?
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap up our conversation on Vindication tonight. So we'll wrap up tonight with one final question, as we always do. Is there anything that's getting you guys excited about in gaming this week? And if you guys don't mind, I'll jump in first on this one. So about a year ago, I don't know if you guys know who Gil Hova is, but he is one of the hosts of the Ludology podcast. So, he's, I think, the only remaining original host. I haven't been listening to it much lately, but it used to be him and Jeff Engelstein when I was listening to it regularly. And the two of them put on basically board game design podcasts. So they talk about a lot of current designs and mechanisms and things like that. Really interesting, even if you're not a designer, if you just like the game industry. Anyway, so he has put out a couple successful games, or reasonably successful. The Networks is supposed to be great. I haven't had a chance to play it, but he put out a game last year called High Rise. Went out on Kickstarter, and it's a city building game. And I remember being kind of surprised by the campaign, because I was interested in him as a designer and a personality, but all the Kickstarter videos were all, like when you see a Kickstarter game out, you see basically its final production. You see final art with it. You see what the board's going to look like and everything. The Kickstarter videos, when it went live, looked like a prototype. It looked like the type of thing that you'd see if you printed up, put something together in Illustrator with some black lines and circles and stuff like that. Anyway, that first Kickstarter ended up failing. He finally got Kwanchai Moriai to do the art for it. So he relaunched the Kickstarter with real art. He put some better videos in there, changed the pricing and some of the mechanisms, stuff like that. Ended up re-releasing it, and it did fund. And I was watching it closely the whole time just because I was rooting for him. Like, I was interested in the game, but, I don't back a whole lot of stuff. So I didn't end up backing it, but I was rooting for him. He did just barely made it over the backing level. Like, he was looking for 30,000, I think, to back last time, and he got it over. So but it was successful. I've heard nothing but good reviews about it, and the game just looks really fun to me. It looks kind of interesting. It's like a city building game where you're kind of doing it's kind of like Glenmore 2, where you're moving around a circle and essentially jumping ahead. So whoever's in the lead waits until the other players come up behind him. Parks, Glenmore, those types of mechanisms. Anyway, looks pretty interesting the way it's all laid out. So he just released it on Kickstarter, and he added an add-on so that the cities, which were just big cardboard cutouts of the towers, they now have big, huge plastic components that you can get with it. And they look really nice. They're really cool sculpts. Really fits with Kwanchai Moriai's art on the rest of the board. So the production looks beautiful. I've heard the game's great. It went live a couple days ago, and he hasn't quite gotten to funding yet again. So the funding level is a little bit higher, but I'm just rooting for him again. So I went ahead and backed it, mainly for the first time ever. I think I backed a campaign, not because I probably would have backed it otherwise, because I think I would just wait for retail or just pick it up in retail now. But I'm just rooting for him, and I wanted to succeed, so I backed it. So that's the one thing. I think people should check it out. It's called High Rise. It's supposed to be a fantastic game. It looks really interesting. It's got a really cool production with it, and I'm not sure sometimes why things don't do as well as other Kickstarters that don't seem as good. So I'm hoping this one succeeds. What about you guys? Anything interesting?
We've actually got something on. Well, I've got something on my mind, and that is, I think a few weeks ago I had mentioned to you guys that I'm on a national park quest right now, which I'm kind of tying with my board games. And for those who hadn't listened to us before, I'm on an epic cross-country national park trip with my family right now. Tim is actually watching our cats, so shout out to Tim for that. And one of the things that I was going to do was I brought my parks game with me, my parks board game, and at every park I was going to go to the visitor center and get the national park stamp, which for those who are national park geeks like I am, there is a passport stamp. And I was going to stamp on each of the cards for each park that I visited the passport stamp on my game card. So sure enough, we showed up at Redwoods National Park in Northern California, and I bring my card into the visitor center, and they were not doing it because of COVID. So they didn't want people handling a stamp,
man.
But they were so they were handing out little sheets of paper with the stamp on it. You could paste it into your book. So I was a little bit bummed out.
That's a bummer.
But then the next place we stopped, which was Whiskeytown National Recreation Area, not a full-fledged national park, but part of the same system. And they were doing stamps. And so I thought, okay, next stop, I'm ready to go. So the next stop was Lassen Volcanic National Park, also in Northern California, like North Central California. And I'm like, I'm ready this time. So I brought my card in. I go into the visitor center. Not only were they not doing the stamps, they were handing out little stickers with the stamp on it, which was of no use to me. But I get back to the car, and I'm like, where's my card?
Oh no!
I lost my game card, and so I'm running around the parking lot. I'm running. I'm like, my wife's kind of looking at me like I've gone crazy. And then finally, I'm getting in my car to head out of there with tears in my eyes. And I look down, and there it is underneath the card. It had fallen out of my pocket. So I may not have gotten my stamp, but at least I got my card back. So next stop this coming week is Yellowstone, which we're expecting to be a highlight of the trip. And I'm just really hoping I can find myself an actual stamp that I can put my actual hands on and stamp my card. So wish me luck.
Good luck, Chris.
I am, wishing you the best of luck. Yellowstone is going to be great. Stamp or no stamp, it's amazing. So I'm looking forward to hearing about your time.
Yeah, just don't mess with the bison. We don't want you gored.
Or the moose or elk.
Yeah. I hear the bison will take your pants off, for those who hadn't seen that YouTube video.
What is flipping someone in their pants when flying off or something like that?
Oh yeah, they this woman went after one of them, trying to get way too close to it, and the bison reached down, it basically shoved its horn up underneath her belt, and then started flinging her around until her pants came off. It was bad news. Don't do it.
Oh, you're going to be the one that's there, so take your own advice. Don't do it.
Yeah.
All right, and Adam, anything you want to chat about before we wrap up?
I want to piggyback on High Rise. I remember being so captivated by Quancha Moria's art. That was a background on my cell phone for a whole year as soon as I saw that art. So that's how I know.
Wow.
That's how I know High Rise.
Impressive.
Nice. I think it's going to fund this time. I mean, I think it was up at 33,000 or something today out of 50,000, and it's just a couple days into the campaign. Okay. So it'll probably do fine. Just, in the day of Kickstarter is typically funding, in 30 minutes or an hour or whatever.
Right.
Maybe it's that I'm not following, some of the more indie games too often, but I'm rooting for them. Anything else?
No, in general, I have nothing I am looking forward to worth mentioning in the board game world. So maybe next week.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Great discussion today. That'll wrap us up on this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. You can find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes, on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes, and on BoardGameGeek.com under Guild 3804. Tell us what you thought of our takes on the game we played today. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Later, guys.
Good night, everyone.